Welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us because today we're doing something truly fascinating. We are taking a timeless teaching and applying it directly to the cubicles, the boardrooms, and the leadership structures we all have to navigate every single day. If you've ever had to deal with workplace friction, toxic office politics, or, hey, even just your own stubborn ego, you are going to get a massive amount of value out of this. So let's jump right in. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? That's Matthew 7:3. I really want you to take a second and just think about this. How incredibly quick are we to judge the minor flaws, the tiny little mistakes of our colleagues or friends, while being completely and utterly blind to our own massive shortcomings? It's human nature, right? We've got an eagle eye for everyone else's errors, but we basically wear blinders when it comes to ourselves. This one single sentence really sets the foundation for understanding the root of so much human conflict. All right, let's dive right into our first section, the speck and plank. You see, this ancient metaphor wasn't just some casual comparison about the physical sizes of mistakes. Not at all. It was exposing the deeply destructive nature of judgment itself. We have the speck. These are these small, sure, maybe slightly irritating faults of others. And then we have the plank, our own massive, blinding flaws. Fixating on that tiny speck in someone else actually creates this false, self-justifying worldview. We kind of convince ourselves that because we can point out a flaw in someone else, well, we must inherently be in the right. We literally use their tiny speck to excuse our giant plank.
Which brings us to section 2, the blind spot of self-righteousness.
So what makes this blind spot so incredibly dangerous? Well, it all comes down to self-righteousness. This is essentially defined as relying on oneself rather than objective truth to determine what is right and wrong. It's this endless, continuous loop of justifying your own actions while constantly condemning everyone else. And this blindness is a trap. It traps us in a mindset where we feel perfectly justified in our arrogance. Think about it. When you're self-righteous, you don't just act poorly. You genuinely believe you are morally correct in doing so. You end up replacing genuine, difficult self-reflection with easy outward criticism. It is pretty much the ultimate defense mechanism for a fragile ego. And, modern society actually puts this whole process on steroids through the trap of the echo chamber. We curate our social media, our friend groups, our information diets to only reflect what we already believe. Inside these echo chambers, our stubbornness starts to feel totally natural. Our arrogance goes completely unchallenged just because everyone around us is nodding in agreement. We actually become numb to our own planks because the echo chamber is constantly validating our focus on the specks of outsiders. Moving on to section 3, let's take a look at the realities of Taiwan's workplaces. Let's move from these high-level concepts straight to the water cooler because I want to see exactly how the plank manifests in our daily professional lives. Have you ever experienced either of these toxic workplace idioms? The first one is old birds eat rookies, which basically refers to seniority-based bullying. It's the seasoned employee who believes their tenure just hands them a free pass to mistreat newcomers. The second is high rank equals great knowledge, which is this wild assumption that just because someone holds a senior title, they automatically possess maturity and wisdom. But look, just because you've been at a company longer, or just because you sit in the fancy corner office, that absolutely does not mean your character naturally commands respect. These idioms represent systemic self-righteousness, where people use their position to justify their planks while aggressively policing the specks of all their subordinates. Now let's zoom out a bit for section 4, crises in leadership groups. Because this doesn't just stay between coworkers, it scales up systemically. What happens to entire organizations or even governments when those in power operate with massive planks in their eyes and zero self-reflection? Well, look at the legislative yuan. When political leaders prioritize ego and point fingers at the specks of their opponents, like the gridlock we see over the year 115 and 116 budgets, the direct consequence is interbranch tension and absolute chaos. Or look at large corporations, taking historical board of directors disputes at places like McKay Hospital as an example. When leaders dig their heels in, fueled by self-righteousness rather than teamwork, it inevitably leads to institutional collapse and deep resentment among employees. These are classic, objectively observable symptoms of what happens when leadership completely lacks humility. Which brings us to a moment of deeply personal accountability. Are you a source of blessing or a source of chaos? In your office, in your family, in your community, when you walk into a room, do things get better, more unified and warmer? Or does your presence, your ego, and your need to be right create tension, division, and chaos? It's a pretty heavy question, but it's an absolutely necessary one. So how do we fix this? Let's get into section 5, the the humility and unity solution. We've diagnosed the disease of the ego, so what is the practical antidote to stop this chaos and actually start building up the people around us? Here are 3 very clear steps. Step 1, cultivate self-reflection and confess faults. This means actively breaking out of your echo chamber and searching for your own plank. Step 2, consider others better than yourself. It's all about adopting a mindset that assumes, hey, you have something to learn from everyone. And step 3, emulate Christ's example of emptying oneself. True leadership isn't about hoarding power or using authority to artificially inflate your own importance. It is about intentionally lowering yourself to serve the collective group. It's about stripping away the ego completely. The contrast between living with a plank versus living with humility is literally night and day. Self-righteousness always ends in arrogance and anger. When you're arrogant, people will naturally distance themselves from your toxic behavior. But here's the kicker. Because of your ego, you'll actually feel persecuted and angry, and you'll just double down on your own delusion. Alternatively, we can choose empathy and warmth by tolerating the weaknesses of others precisely because you intimately know your own weaknesses. You can walk together, unified, on a shared path. This is how you build teams rather than destroying them. I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Will you choose to be the light and salt that brings warmth, or the ego that brings chaos? The very next time you feel tempted to hyperfixate on that tiny speck in your coworker's eye, I hope you remember this explainer. Just pause, look inward, check for planks, and choose empathy over judgment. Thank you so much for learning with me today. Keep reflecting, stay humble, and I will see you in the next one.